are now listening to the Film Situation podcast.
Okay, we're so pleased to have Cate Sanderson on the Film Situation podcast, president of Bleecker Street. Welcome, Cate.
Thanks for having me.
The last time we spoke, it was on the Globe Screen podcast. So shout out to my good friend Dara, who runs Globe Screen. But since then, you've gone from head of acquisitions to being named president of Bleecker Street in the last year. So congratulations on that.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been a fun ride. We're celebrating our 10th year as a company, and looking forward to the next 10.
And I guess what sort of responsibilities does your new role as president entail?
Helping to run the company alongside of our CEO, Andrew Karpin. So, a remit that still obviously focuses on our acquisitions and co-productions. But I also at that time oversaw all of our home video strategy and streaming strategy. I negotiated our output deals with everyone from Amazon to Hulu to now Paramount Plus with Showtime. So there's more of that at play, but then also I'm touching more aspects of the company, including, nuts and bolts financially, more marketing and publicity, just sort of a general more, I'm involved in just more departments across the spectrum.
Gotcha. Speaking of which, marketing and publicity, I saw the trailer and social media ads for Rumors that you guys put out. And I guess it was released today, right? Starring Cate Blanchett and Alicia Vikander. And
yeah, it's out today.
For the audience that doesn't know, the tagline for the film is "Leaders of 7 wealthy democracies get lost in the woods while drafting a statement on a global crisis, facing danger as they attempt to find their way out." The trailer looks great, by the way. I can't wait to see the movie.
Yeah, it's really fun. There's kind of nothing else like it. So it's been a great pleasure to work on it.
And I had already sent you an email about it, but I saw an ad, not even realizing it was a Bleecker Street. Like, it was after we made the plans for you to be on the podcast, but I just happened to stumble on an Instagram ad and I was like, wow, this looks really cool looking. And then I was looking closer and I saw that it was Bleecker Street.
Yeah, it's funny. I had a friend at my son's preschool who's not in the industry, but he came up to me. He's like, "Yeah, I saw this really interesting article about this movie that this filmmaker Guy Madden directed. Do you know anything about this?" I was like, "Yeah, it's one of ours. It's our movie." This guy,
I'm the executive producer on it.
I am an executive producer on it. Yeah, Guy did an amazing interview with the New York Times Magazine where he took them around his native Winnipeg. And it became sort of a tour of not only his home, but also his life and career. It's a really great interview, great article.
I'll have to check that one out. And by the way, you mentioned Andrew Karpin before. I saw that, I want to congratulate him because I saw that he received the Variety Vanguard Award. So although I don't know him personally, everybody that I do know that knows him speaks highly of him. So,
yeah, Andrew's the best. He's my friend. He's my colleague. He's my mentor. I was thrilled to be there when he got that award. I somewhat recently moved to Los Angeles, so I popped back over to New York for it. But it was it was a really special night.
Great, and it seems like he's been a key figure in the independent film world.
I've been working with Andrew since late 2007. So. With a short break in between Focus and Bleecker, where I worked for a different company, but no, he's a great leader. What's great about Andrew is a couple of things. One is as a leader of a company, he's always been somebody who's fostered a family-like atmosphere, and wanting to make sure that everyone's voices are heard, but also that people are having fun in this crazy business of ours, and that's always been something that he brought to our time at Focus Features, which is obviously part of a much bigger company under the Universal umbrella, and then into a startup like Bleecker Street. Really, relish rolling up his sleeves and taking a company that started in one of my colleagues' living rooms around a coffee table to having a couple dozen people working on putting out movies every couple of weeks.
That's amazing.
And Andrew's also a person who's just, he has a real gift for knowing what movies are, hopefully are going to pop, but also, understanding the underlying business that is that is film distribution, because it is a business and it's not an easy one, and it's not a simple one. And he's always been one who's able to roll the times and adapt.
What's the percentage of films that you guys distribute versus produce?
So Bleecker Street's not a production company per se, and I'm going to try to make this as the least amount of boring possible. But basically, when Bleecker comes onto a film, we are essentially, it's always structured like an acquisition of distribution rights. So so for example, Rumors, which you mentioned, that's a film we came onto during production in order to help with the financing of the film, but we didn't produce the film. I didn't fly over to Hungary to oversee production. It's not it's not a Bleecker Street production in that way. Rather, it's what's called a negative pickup. And a lot of films that are out there that kind of seem like maybe a studio made them are in fact structured this way. It's just that Bleecker really just does this as our go-to strategy. So in terms of those movies, and yeah, you could probably figure out which ones those are based on executive producer credits. But those will account for around 50 to 60% of our annual slate. So like this year, some of those would include Sasquatch Sunset, Rumors, The Return, which comes out in December, The Fabulous Four with Bette Midler, which came out in July. We have a remake of Ang Lee's The Wedding Banquet, directed by Andrew On, that's in post-production. That's that way. A film called Fockham Hall, which is a parody of Downton Abbey, starts production in 2 weeks from Monday in the UK. But all of these are essentially, we're putting in a piece of the financing, but we're not producing the movie, if that makes sense. Also, it's helpful to me because I truly hate being on set. So
interesting. Yeah, I guess it's being on set as a producer, it feels like maybe it just adds to, I could say as like a director, a producer on board that's not just like the producer, my sort of developing producer. It seems like it might be like, oh man, I'm being sort of watched in a way.
Yeah, and I'm very cognizant of that. So when I go to set, I'm usually there for a couple of hours. I steal some craft services and then I leave, because otherwise, it's it's not like I'm David Zaslav showing up on set, but if I represent sort of the money and the distribution. And so I tend to try to keep a low profile because everyone's like, oh, I want to make sure you see this or see this. I'm like, you should focus on making the movie. I don't want my presence here to make it worse. So,
Yeah.
and that's been typical. And so if I go to set at all, it's usually just for a quick hello, really just demonstrate support or spend time with, a little bit of time with some of the filmmakers and talent, and then really just get out of there and let people do their thing, because we'll have a much more active role in post-production. And to some degree in pre-production, but when they're actually making the movie, it's better not to just be a distraction and just support the production in any way you can.
Yeah, I think that says something about a company that you guys are really championing independent filmmakers and giving them some latitude to let them be creative. Really,
that's what brings us joy. That's where we believe we fit the marketplace. Granted, if somebody wanted to give us access to Lucasfilm IP, I'm sure we can have a lot of fun doing that as well, but I don't think that's in the cards.
I guess let's go back a little bit. Let's go back to the beginning. How'd you first get involved in independent film?
So I was originally a computer science and international relations major, and ended up making a bet with myself that if I got into NYU's film school as a transfer student after my sophomore year of college, that I would do it. So I got in. So I guess I won the bet, if that's a thing. So I went to film school, and when I got out, even though I had made some movies when I was there, it became very clear to me that I didn't want to be an independent filmmaker, because it's a really hard life, and when you're 22 and don't have financial resources, and rather I set about a career in the on the business side. So I after 6 interviews got a job in the mailroom at William Morris talent agency as part of their agent training program, which is, you're literally in the basement of the office building, doing odd jobs and then delivering the mail to each office. And it's really sort of I don't want to describe it as a hazing program, but it's sort of like, I'm down there with Harvard MBAs and people that are going to go someplace, but they kind of have to do this exercise first. So I was really lucky to get in there, because even though it's literally the least glamorous job in the business you can imagine, worked my way up, eventually started working for a senior talent agent in the mid to late 2000s. So working with John Travolta, Queen Latifah, Terrence Howard, Jennifer Lopez as an assistant to this agent. All while I always knew that I wanted to go work at a studio or a production company and do that. So I eventually got a job at Focus Features as the assistant to the then president, Andrew Carpin. And I worked with Andrew for a bit, and sort of got to the place where I was like, well, I'd love to be promoted now and do that. And then the Great Recession hit, and nobody was getting new jobs. There was a massive hiring freeze across all the studios. And I kind of realized that the creative path was probably not accessible to me at that point in time. And so I ended up really pushing ahead with a career and pushing Focus to give me a role that allowed me to help develop our relationships in the digital distribution space and the VOD. We ended up starting a label for VOD distribution called Focus World, which I ran for about 2 years. And we had gotten to the point where, and I started, being a part of the larger acquisitions group within Focus and Universal at that point, because I was buying movies for VOD, while also, sort of guiding the company's direction in that. So I ended up sort of inching my way into the creative space. And then they closed the New York office of Focus fairly abruptly. And then they offered a handful of executives the opportunity to move to LA to continue with the company. And I will say that 3 of those executives were founding members of Bleecker Street, including myself, Andrew, one of our heads of marketing. At the time, we all wanted to stay in New York, and we all wanted to forge our own path. And we did that. Of course, 8 years later, I ended up moving to Los Angeles anyway, but that's a longer story.
But I guess you grew up loving movies, and you must have, before deciding to go to film school, had some sort of deep love of cinema.
Yeah, no, the short version is I was studying, a couple different things. But, international relations and politics was chief among them. And I had dinner with my parents one night, and they're like, my dad was like, you will never be president of the United States. You'd be a terrible politician. You're too uncompromising. You'd be bad at it. All you do is talk about movies. Why don't you do movies?
Interesting.
That was kind of the sum total of it.
That's pretty cool that you're, because usually it's a lot of parents are like, why do you want to get into that for? And it's usually kind of a struggle. When you spent a significant amount of time at Focus Features, what are some sort of key takeaways or lessons that you learned there during your experiences there? I'm sure you were learning constantly, just every day.
No, it's funny more to look at it through the lens of working for a highly independent company versus, part of a studio. And that, Focus has gone through a number of iterations over the years, but when I was there, it became, it was very different to have, oversight of, I started working for Focus when it was owned by General Electric. And now I work at a company called Bleecker Street with a couple dozen people, but it's not, hundreds of thousands
part of a
employees.
large conglomerate. Yeah.
Yeah. I think in some ways there's pluses and minuses to both. When you work at a big company like Focus, you have the luxury of having a lot more financial resources. You have worldwide distribution and output deals that are geared to for much bigger movies, which makes your ability to make choices a lot easier. Like you don't have to, more things are good ideas financially at a major studio than at an independent, even if you're paying the same amount to go make a movie, just because your infrastructure is able to monetize that more just by virtue of your outputs. for the most part. Like, and I'm speaking mostly internationally in that case, but that's a big component of making movies is being able to have value against international rights, which is not something that Bleecker Street does directly.
And the exposure is different, basically, right? Because they can incur, you know, let's say 7-8 losses and maybe a couple of hits that recoup for those that
yeah,
aren't.
and they have
Right?
most importantly, they have a library that throws off just revenue, you know, year after year after year. If you have hundreds and hundreds of movies in your library, that revenue coming in will help offset any losses on new releases that didn't work out. You know, Bleecker Street's getting to that point too after 10 years where, you know, we're going to be closer to 100 movies after next year, but it's not, you know, so like Focus, which had, when I was there, and this was, you know, 11 years ago at this point, you know, north of 300 movies in this library that came across from, you know, Focus itself, specialized movies that Universal had been involved with, Gramercy Pictures, USA Films, some of the sort of corporate ancestors of Focus. And so they had this just very large library that I could play with as part of my digital distribution life, when helping to re-highlight some of the past movies, you know, or in some cases even rescue them from, you know, music clearance hell. Like, you know, there was a time that you could not rent Brazil or Wet Hot American Summer on VOD because the music rights had to be cleaned up. And that was one of my first jobs doing digital distribution work at Focus.
I know that's the case for a lot of TV shows too, back in the day.
For what?
There's a lot of television shows from back in the day. Like I was reading about this show when I was a kid called Wise Guy, and people talk about how amazing the soundtrack was, and they had to put all this other music in it because they didn't have the rights to like those amazing original songs by known artists, and everybody just, the audiences just hated it.
Yeah, like the Wonder Years too was the same thing, where all of a sudden like this classic soundtrack was like, what is this music? But the disadvantages of that is that you have an enormous amount of oversight. You know, obviously Universal made the decision to, you know, completely get rid of most of the executives or the entire executive team at Focus at one point. And that was their decision to go make. And, you know, I remember we'd have to get on these green light calls. Well, my bosses did anyway. And everyone, you know, there'd be, you know, the head of home video and the head of worldwide Universal Pictures marketing and the head of Universal, and the number 2 of Universal is, and everyone sort of would vote up or down. And then my job as an assistant was to go send a packet around for everybody around these worldwide offices to go sign off on green lighting a movie, whether there's an acquisition, whether it's a production, whatever it may be. And then, you know, at Bleecker Street, it's like, I just, you know, I'm talking to, you know, Andrew Carpin, and I'd be like, hey, so should we do, you know, we should do this. He's like, okay. And then we just go do it. Like, that's it. There's no green light committee.
There's not a lot of red tape.
Yeah, we can just, you know, figure things out on the fly and make fast decisions, which can be advantageous. And, you know, certainly, I think we've gotten a bit of a reputation to be able to make fast decisions. I mean, the movie Rumors, that's out today had a financing issue, and the production was gonna have to shut down. And so the producer called me that night from Europe and was like, if I send you all of our dailies so far in the script, do you think you can make a decision quickly? And we came in the next morning.
Amazing. And how does it work? How does it work with a company like yours? Are you connected with a bank that's doing like sort of bank loans on that? Or is it directly like you have funds to just greenlight these things? How does that typically work?
We have what's called I don't want to get too much into it, but we have what's called a rotating credit facility with Union Bank.
Gotcha.
And so what that basically means is we have money that we can pay for things, but you know, when you put out a movie, when you pay for a movie and when you release it, it's not like the revenue comes back the next day. And so if you're releasing a movie every 3 to 5 weeks, you need to be able to have some inflow that's not really directly related to each individual movie and each individual revenue stream. So like, for example, Amazon is the biggest VOD provider in the world at this point. They represent the majority of VOD revenue for any given movie. But when you rent a movie from Amazon, I'm not seeing any of that money for like 3 months. And
Right.
so a company like Union basically allows it to say, like, this is what the movie's going to do, so they can help advance us some of that revenue so we could put it towards other movies. And that's a very standard arrangement that everyone from us to A24 to Neon, basically every independent company has something like this in order to help deploy capital more quickly.
That makes sense. But from a funding standpoint, for independent films in the US, does most funding come from private equity?
No, I don't know I have to go look at what the division is. I think it in some ways it's seasonal. You go to Sundance, and all those movies are funded with private equity.
Gotcha.
You go to Toronto, and most of those movies are gonna be financed maybe with some private equity, but primarily debt and pre-sales and or just made by studio. So it really depends where the movie is. I mean, for Bleecker, when we buy a movie finished, I mean, transparently, while you were closing the door, a movie just closed. So we have another title for next year. Can't tell you what it is, but it's a good one. And that movie was made with private equity. It wasn't pre-sold. It was just made. And whereas, when we come onto a movie, so like, so looking at the posters behind me, for example, Sasquatch Sunset was made, yes, with private equity, but part of that equity was, or part of those investors were coming in as debt against my U.S. distribution offer, as well as a handful of foreign distribution offers. The Art of Self-Defense, this other one over here, was made entirely. It was paid for by a single individual, but I essentially guaranteed 100% of the budget as a part of my offer.
Gotcha.
So like,
By the way, that was a great movie.
thank you. Yeah, that was a fun one. And that's one of the rare ones where Bleecker Street controlled worldwide rights in the movie, and
Right.
I ended up partnering with Universal Pictures on the international.
Yeah, no, it was really good. I really like Alessandro Nivola as well.
He's great. It was really fun to have two movies with him within like a 6-month span, where the first one was Disobedience, where he played a, very sort of reserved British rabbi.
Interesting.
And then he played, the malicious sensei in the Art of Self-Defense. So Sandro's great.
Yeah. Um, he was also great. He's great in everything. I actually wish I see him in more movies. There was a movie that I saw him in back in the day called $5 a Day, with Christopher Walken, where he played Christopher Walken's son, and I thought it was just like a fantastic character-driven film.
Oh, that's cool. I'll check it out.
Yeah, and he was in Face Off, where he played Nick Cage's brother.
Oh, you mean Pollux Troy?
Yeah, that's right. And shout out to David Permit, who was on the Film Situation podcast, and is a friend of the podcast and was the producer of Face Off.
Yeah, David's great.
I was talking to him the other night on the phone, and I told him that I was having you on the podcast, and he had nothing but nice things to say about you.
Well, now all we have to do is find a way to make a movie together.
Yeah. So, by the way, last year you guys released Ezra, directed by Tony Goldwyn and with Bobby Cannavale and Robert De Niro. And it's, for people that don't know, it's a dramatic comedy about a dad who's a single dad and a stand-up comedian. And he's going through a lot of challenges because he has an autistic son. And that's a movie that was really sort of near and dear to me because my son Andrew has autism. And so I loved the film, actually.
Oh, thank you so much for saying that.
Yeah, it was fantastic. I actually saw it. I made it a point to go see it in the theater, at the Brattleboro, the Latches Theater in Vermont, near where I am right now, right across the street where I am currently. So I encourage audiences, go see movies in the cinema. I'm sure you would do the same, Kent.
Yes, I absolutely encourage that. It's the best way to see a movie, especially a film as emotional as Ezra. It's like I saw that movie in Toronto when we picked it up and really enjoyed it. And then I saw it again at what was our sort of an LA premiere, but it was a neurodiverse audience and organization that was really for, and I brought my wife, and we just sobbed through the whole thing. It just plays so much. The movies play so much more powerfully in the theater.
Oh my God, definitely. It's something I talk a lot about on the podcast is just I made an independent film, and it's just a really small, super micro budget thing called The Trouble. And I remember telling a film festival, somebody that was running a film festival, I said, "Hey, just so you know, this plays way better with the audience." And when I met him, he's like, "Zeph, when you said that, I thought you were saying some pretentious filmmaker shit." He's like, "But it really does." He's like, "The audience is played so much better with the audience." I'm like, "Thank you."
No, it's true, and it's you can always tell. And I hate doing it because I'm a big whiner, but sometimes when movies are available to sell, they'll actually bring an audience to they'll rent out a theater like at the Grove or something like that in LA, and then all the buyers will go sit there, and they'll have like a designated row for where the buyers go, but then the rest of the audience is just a regular audience that they brought in. So you can see how the movie really plays, because there's no worse way to watch a movie theater in a dead still room full of other distribution executives.
They don't react to things the same
They
way.
don't react. Everyone's looking at their phones. Like, I get why they do this.
Yeah, that is the worst. I've been in the situation where I'm like screening like one of my shorts for somebody, where it's like a friend of mine that's a producer, and they're just looking at their phone the whole time, and I'm like, it's horrible.
That's not very nice.
It's never nice. How does Bleecker Street balance finding films that appeal to a broad audience while staying true to the spirit of independent cinema?
It's not a one for us, one for them approach. It's really, I love to look at a slate of 8 to 10 movies and say this is a portfolio approach that we believe in. This year in particular was one where we had such a wildly diverse slate that it'll be really interesting to go back and say, all right, well, this one worked and this one didn't, and what does that mean? And there's also, I would say that we tend to get involved with movies that we're passionate about first, and then, are there occasionally, films where we're like, well, there's a business reason to do this? Yeah, but not very often at all. That's not really how we're set up. There are some companies that are a little bit more, oh, we'll do this for the sake of doing it, but it's not really our thing. We tend to be very filmmaker focused. I mean, like, The Art of Self-Defense came from literally, I saw Riley Stearns's first movie, this film called Fault at South by Southwest, and I was like, we got to do whatever that guy's doing next, and starting it from there. Whereas, and then when we see a movie in Toronto or Sundance or Cannes, getting that feeling in your gut of like, this is something that's special and something I want to be able to work on. That tends to be what we chase more. And then rather, what we then do is take that feeling and then turn it into an Excel chart of, this is what the actual P&L of the movie looks like, and does our passion match our appetite for risk?
That's the most producer thing you've said. Taking that feeling and turning it into an Excel chart. I'm an Excel, but now I use it a lot. My one takeaway from working in the corporate world for many years is that Excel is super helpful in many different things.
Yeah, I when I got into the movie business, I did not think I'd be using Excel quite as much as I do.
It's funny you say that. So I mentor film students, and when we're prepping to do a short film, I have like screenshots. Sometimes it's over Zoom, and I have all these line items on Excel. I'm like, do you guys see what we're doing? They're like, yeah. I'm like, this is producing. I was like, you'd never think that producing is just like, making stuff on a spreadsheet, but that's what it is sometimes.
It's that, and then you got to be like they do it in the movies where the producer's on the phone and he yells a lot and then slams the phone down. That's producing.
Yeah. Have you ever seen the producer Jerry Weintraub, the documentary about
I have
him?
not.
Okay, it's amazing. It's amazing. It's like a must watch. I think you'll definitely appreciate it. He was the producer of the Ocean's 11 movies and the Karate.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
And he has an incredible book too that said, "You'll know." I think it's titled something to the effect of, "You'll know that I'm dead when I stop talking," or something. I saw that also that you guys are releasing, and you mentioned it, I think already, that Mike Leigh's upcoming film, Hard Truths. So I'm definitely excited about that one.
It's an amazing movie. Really, just a gift to be able to work with Mike and his team on, in general, and on that movie. Just been great. It's been a long journey too. It's been almost 5 years since we came onto it. There was a slight interruption in the form of a worldwide pandemic. But then we were thrilled to be able to hang on and be a part of the group that helped make make it happen. It's just a great movie.
Yeah. Have you seen Secrets and Lies?
Secrets and Lies was one of those movies I rescued at Focus too.
No way.
Yeah, did you know they sang Happy Birthday in that movie? That used to be a big problem.
That's crazy. I didn't even realize you can't sing Happy Birthday in a film.
You can now, but that's only in the last 2 or 3 years that that song is now public domain. But it was
Interesting.
technically copyrighted. That's why if you ever the only movies you see people that were made before 2020 where people sang Happy Birthday would have to be massively budgeted movies because it was so expensive. Then otherwise you'll generally see the birthday party starts with the person blowing out the candles. You don't get to hear the song because
That's
the song
right.
is too expensive.
No, I've heard that before. And when I was a kid, I don't know if this is true or not, but there was a rumor or something that Paul McCartney owned the rights to Happy Birthday. You know, that was like a
I don't.
pervasive rumor when I was a kid. I have no idea if it's true or not. I've never fact checked that, but like when I was a kid, many people used to say that, like, oh, the Beatles own the right to Happy Birthday.
I don't think that's true, but somebody did.
Yeah, somebody did. And I think I also knew because when you go to like a restaurant or like a TGI Fridays or something, they wouldn't really sing Happy Birthday. They'd sing like some weird variation of it or something.
That's exactly right.
This is kind of a random question. What's your take on day and date releases for films?
So I'm not against them, in principle. The theatrical experience is, I think, valuable, and I think that in the eyes of the moviegoer, having an exclusive theatrical window legitimizes the film as a film and not as a streaming movie, not as a TV movie, not as something else. Um, from a business perspective, I think in some ways that time has come and gone of that being a good version of how to release a movie. There was a moment, certainly during COVID, and even before and a little bit after, where having a simultaneous release was fine, where you have a limited theatrical footprint, but it's really a movie for VOD and streaming. And I think what's happened fairly recently is that consumers have gotten wise to it. And when they see a movie like, oh, I've never heard of this movie and it's not playing in any movie theaters, but they want me to pay $7, $10, $20 for it, I think consumers are smart enough to realize, I bet if I wait like 2 months, this film will be on Netflix or Amazon or Hulu. And they're usually right.
Yeah.
I have some insight into sort of the way that movies that are released that way have been performing the last year, and it's not a good story. So I think that the theatrical first and theatrical exclusive, even if that's not a huge, wide 3,000 screen release, from a business perspective, it's never been clear to me that is really, really important.
Yeah, I could see that. For some reason, as an audience, for me that just loves movies, for some reason I don't like it. I don't, and I can't give you a clear reason why I don't like it, but
look, it by definition hamstrings the theatrical release, and if it's playing in theaters, there's not going to be in very many theaters, and they're probably not going to be, the best theaters or the most, the biggest, best houses that you could possibly imagine. So,
yeah,
is it a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy where, there's always been movies that essentially were, quote unquote, direct to video, and the day and date model, and in many ways, just replaced that. That you have sort of a low grade action movie that would you would just find on Blockbuster, and the model evolved from being something you pick up from the bottom shelf of a video store to, oh, this is playing for one show a day in 5 theaters nationwide, but I can rent it at home.
yeah, I see what you're saying.
And it's kind of the same kind of movie, in my humble and hopefully not too insulting opinion to the fine people that make films like that.
No, that makes perfect sense. And earlier you mentioned output deals for people that are maybe not in the industry or learning about such things. How would you describe an output deal?
Every studio and major independent distributor will have a designated dance partner, as it were, for what's called the pay television window. So in order, you have your theatrical release, then you have your home entertainment release, and that includes VOD, so you can rent it or buy it, and DVD and Blu-ray. And then at some point, weeks or months after that, it'll go into what's called the first pay television window. Pay television because essentially that model was invented with HBO. That it was a television channel that had movies that you had to pay for, hence pay television. Now that window is occupied by, yes, HBO and Max, Netflix, Amazon Prime, Showtime, Stars, Paramount Plus, Tubi, MGM Plus. There's a wide variety of streamers, but every company has an output deal so that when the time comes for it to go into that pay television window, there are preset terms for sort of what the license fees will be. Bleeckers had the luxury of moving around a bit because we continuously get improved terms from various companies. So we started, our first deal we did was with Amazon Prime. We were with them for 4 years before moving over to Hulu, and then we moved over to Showtime, and which is now Paramount Plus with Showtime, back in late 2021, early 2022, and I suspect we'll be there for a bit.
It's been interesting to see you guys evolve as a company. I feel like you're branching out, and films are becoming even more eclectic in different genres, even. And so that's been pretty cool to see.
Yeah, no, and it's been fun to do. Love giving our marketing and PR folks a sense of whiplash all the time.
Before we move to our next portion of the podcast, is there anything that any other films or anything else that Bleecker Street is up to that folks should be looking out for?
No, look, we've got an exciting fall. Rumors comes out today, which is this podcast is being recorded on October 18th. And then The Return with Ralph Fiennes. He plays basically it's a realistic adaptation of the last third of the Odyssey. So the movie begins with Ralph washing up on the shores of Ithaca to reclaim his kingdom. That premiered in Toronto, and it's been a film I've literally been following for more than 20 years, as they've been trying to get it made, and to be a part of putting it together when it actually happened was a great thrill. That comes out December 6th. Also on December 6th will be the New York qualifying run of Hard Truths, followed by a rollout into January, which is just an incredible movie. And we've got some great stuff in post. We got some great stuff starting production. We have next year. I think it's going to be a great year for us. So just stay tuned for another maybe slightly less eclectic movies. There's no pooping Sasquatches in the forecast for 2025, but we have some fun stuff planned.
Switch gears and go to our next portion of the podcast, where I ask each guest what are 2 of their favorite movie scenes from any 2 films of all time. And by the way, Kent, you are totally the winner. You have answered the quickest out of anybody I've ever asked this question. I sent Kent the email and he responded within like 2 minutes, and I was very pleased about that.
Well, he said in his email not to overthink it, so I was like, challenge accepted.
Okay,
I'm not going to overthink it.
I'm gonna start saying that to everybody, because for people that are film lovers, I understand, like even for myself, it might be a daunting sort of task. So I don't want to make it like that it's about your absolute and but it's just any 2 scenes that you love for any reasons. And I was also super pleased that you chose a scene from Superman the movie, which is really, really near and dear to my heart, because when I was a kid, everybody in my family knows that I was a Superman fanatic. I used to watch the VHS tape, the Superman films every day, of Superman 1, 2, and 3. Not so much Part 4. Even when I was a kid, I had discerning enough taste to not love Part 4 as much as
see. I'm a Part 4 apologist, if only because I think it. If only because I think it. Yeah, because at least the movie's trying to be something that resembles a Superman movie, as opposed to Superman 3, which is a bad Richard Pryor comedy. But I will say
I'm a Part 3 apologist. I liked Part 3 growing up. I liked how he returned to Smallville. I liked Lana Lang in it. I didn't mind Richard Pryor. I was into it.
It does have the best visual effects of any of the 4 movies. I'll say that the flying scenes are really impressive in that movie.
So Kent chose the helicopter sequence where in the iconic scene, Lois Lane is at the Daily Planet building for an assignment when she boards a helicopter to leave. And as the helicopter is taken off from the building's roof helipad, a malfunction happens and the helicopter's controls fail. They swing wildly. Lois is trapped inside, dangling hundreds of feet around the streets of Metropolis. In the crowd below, Clark Kent, hearing all the commotion, rushes into action, tearing open his shirt to, you see that he's Superman. He goes and basically saves Lois, who's stunned, of course. And yeah, it was quite a scene. So I'll let you talk about it a little bit and why it's important to you.
Well, first of all, I was raised in a Superman household. My name is Kent because I'm named after Superman. Not by, I didn't name myself Kent. My father was a huge fan and named me
Yeah. They
Kent.
never thought to name you Clark?
The dog was named Clark.
Okay, gotcha. So he had the name first, and then they named
Yeah,
you.
Clark was a year older than I was.
Got
And
you.
then when Clark died, this is all true. Clark died, was replaced by a golden retriever named Lois. And then Lois died in old age, replaced by a English Springer Spaniel named Jimmy Olsen. And then Olsen died. They just called him Olsen. Olsen died, and they just got another dog named Clark.
Amazing.
So the cycle is beginning again.
Yeah.
Anyway, no, it's Superman was a is really instructive movie for me, just as somebody who also wore out VHS tapes, watching it over and over again. And what I always loved about that movie in general, and it really comes across in that scene, is Richard Donner always put the word verisimilitude on top of the entrance to the production office, which basically means truth. That he wanted to really tell a story about a completely fantastical thing that happens in a very real world. And seeing, a guy in a Superman costume, somewhat convincingly even today, take off in the middle of a very gritty New York style street with that incredible score was always just floored me. And as I grew older, I got to appreciate it even more, because I actually love the specificity of the time in those early Superman movies, because they feel like they're made in the 70s. And it would really be like to have, a guy in a blue, yellow, and red costume appear out of nowhere and take off into the sky. I also loved the way it was cut. And I remember it was one of my first film school assignments was to take one of your favorite movie scenes of all time and storyboard it. And so I was like, oh, I'll do the helicopter scene. And I'm watching, and I'm just, I can't draw for save my life, but I'm like sketching it out. And I realize how many cuts there are in the scene. And I'm like, I'm not doing this scene. This is going to take, it's like 500 cuts in 5 minutes in the scene. And so I forgot what I chose, but it always really resonated with me.
Yeah, that's funny, because when I was at SVA, they made us do the same assignment when I used to take the workshop there when I was in high school. And I chose the scene from The Lost Boys where Jason Patric's character is hanging off that ledge on the highway when the Kiefer Sutherland and like the vampires are terrorizing it. But yeah, Superman, I'm so happy you mentioned it again. I was a fanatic when I was a kid. In fact, I was gonna bust out the photos, but they're at my house in New York, where when I was a young kid, I used to wear the Superman shirt, and my grandfather used to cut my hair, and so I used to take his barber's cape that he would use to cut my hair, and just like always wear it as, pretending that I was Superman and jumping off the couches and things like that. And,
well, that's amazing.
I come from a very large Albanian family, and so even for many years I'd go to weddings and people would be like, "Ah, Superman." They would like, like different people who couldn't even speak English I was like known for that, loving Superman.
That's fantastic.
But yeah, I agree, man. And it's funny. I'm also grateful that you mentioned it, because I have a 6-year-old daughter, so it gave me the chance to revisit the film and show it to my 6-year-old, who she loved it actually. So it still sort of holds up. And I was thinking the same thing about just kind of, because now watching it as I'm older and I haven't seen it in quite some time, but realizing just, wow, like it does. It's a superhero film, but it also captures that gritty sort of 1970s cinema that I love, of just kind of how you mentioned, of just the way it's shot, and just the characters that are in the film, like, like just the bustling sort of Daily Planet, and just, kind of the cynicism that's going on all around him. And here's this optimistic guy.
I'm looking forward to the new one for that reason as well, because apparently it's really going to dial back in on sort of optimism versus cynicism. And I think that's just so core to the character.
Yeah.
It's also such a shame that it was Jeffrey Unsworth's last movie as a director of photography, and just what a thoughtful approach. I mean, they used really 3 entirely different methods of filming, between the early scenes on Krypton, which had that sort of diffuse light look, and very sort of stately and slow moving camera, to what sort of aping a sort of John Ford's epic American West style during the Smallville scenes,
That's right. Yeah,
And
showing the
then
sprawling landscape.
going right into, much more modern, gritty, grainy photography for the Metropolis scenes. It's just such a cool thing and for me, it's like a really great way of explaining cinematography to people of like, just look at what they're doing here and look at these images look like they're from three different movies. Because it's carrying, it's kind of taking this biblical epic approach to a superhero character. And I think it's such a thoughtfully made movie. Especially, in retrospect, knowing that nobody had ever done anything like that before.
Yeah, even their costumes in the Krypton scenes were incredible, right? How it's just like they were reflective, and
Yeah.
that was pretty incredible. And by the way, when I was a kid, Superman 2 was my favorite, actually, one with General Zod and just him facing off against them. But in part 1, just when he spins around the Earth to reverse time to save Lois, that was something that always was anchored in my mind of just how impactful that was. And then when you get older,
I showed it to my 7-year-old over Christmas last year. I remember how nervous he got when Lois died, and I just said to him, like, "Hey, buddy, it's a Superman movie. I promise you, it's going to work out."
nice. He must have enjoyed watching that with you.
Oh yeah, he still talks about it.
Nice, nice. And yeah, Superman directed by Richard Donner, who was born in the Bronx, by the way, just like Stanley Kubrick.
Oh, cool. I should have known that given his accent, but
I didn't know that either until sort of doing some research. But I will tell you a quick story that one of my best friends, this guy Georgi Pushka, he was just a character, and one of the first, he is an Albanian immigrant guy, first friend of mine to become just like totally self-made, doing extremely well for himself, like came from sort of nothing. But I remember the first, when we were in our early 20s, we went out to a nightclub and he brought a few of his buddies from the Bronx. These guys look like they were all, immigrants from Albania, and they were all so excited to be out. And George was just like a character. He's given his friends, not me, but he was giving these like 3 other friends money from his pocket like it was Monopoly money. And they all worked like construction jobs, and George just was a character. And we're out at this nightclub, and 2 of these guys get into an argument amongst each other because one of them, I don't know, they both like the same girl, and they were sort of fighting over who gets to talk to her, that sort of thing. And then George wasn't having it. We were outside the club when they were arguing. He was like, that's it. He calls a cab and puts the 3 of them in a cab and tells them to, like, gives the cab driver $60 and was like, all right, have them go back to the Bronx. And when they were leaving the cab, I swear it looked like General Zod and the 2 other cronies in the Phantom Zone, because one of the guys literally put his hands on the glass. I'll never forget, like, that cab, like, leaving to go to the Bronx, and it looked like when the 3 villains are in the glass in the Phantom Zone.
it's hilarious.
It was just so funny. By the way, here's another piece of trivia. Did you know that Sam Peckinpah, that directed The Wild Bunch, was considered, they were first considering him to direct Superman?
Yeah, that would have been an interesting choice.
Really interesting choice.
Sam Peckinpah directing Sylvester Stallone as Superman. Very different movie.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah, Sylvester Stallone was lobbying for the part, and then they didn't give it to him. So yeah,
yeah. There was a great book I read decades ago. It's been long out of print, called "The Making of Superman the Movie," which is just basically all the information at this point is out there. But it's such a fascinating movie. It was the most expensive film ever made when it came out. And part of that was the cost of partially shooting the sequel, but it was $45 million in 1978, which is crazy.
Serious money. Yeah, it's a lot of money now. Not for like a big film, for like a big studio film, but I mean, a $45 million movie is still, like, by.
No, it's
45
not
million
small.
is still a lot of money.
The Sasquatch movie did not cost $45 million. Let me tell you
Yeah,
that.
that's what I'm saying. So yeah, again, thank you for bringing that one up. It was good to sort of revisit that film. And actually, one last thing is just like, when I was a kid, I always loved it, but watching it now and just paying attention to performances and actors and just seeing Christopher Reeve in that role, I'm like, wow, who could have done it better? for that film. No, it was like perfect casting.
Yeah, just a complete random recommendation. Well, not random, but related. But the documentary Superman, the Christopher Reeve story, which played Sundance, and Warner Brothers picked it up out of Sundance, and it's been, just put it out in theaters last weekend. Truly wonderful documentary. It's a new film from the guys that we did McQueen with, one of Bleecker's only documentaries, and it's just a wonderful and emotional movie. So highly recommend it when it comes to. I think it'll be on Max by the end of the year.
Oh, cool! I definitely gonna watch that one. All right. So the next one that you mentioned was Contact, and by the way, I did something sort of silly. Made a dumb mistake that you said Contact in the email, but for some reason in my head, I thought you said the movie Arrival, and then I watched Arrival the other day.
Good movie. Good movie.
And it was a good movie, and I actually liked it a lot more on the second watch. I was like, wow, this is an incredible film. I think like the first time I watched it, I must have been tired and just was like sort of checked out. I don't know if that's ever happened to you, where you're watching a good movie, but if it's like a certain time at night, there's like, it's.
Yeah, I think it happens to everybody. And sometimes yeah, for sure.
So then when I checked your email again, I'm like, oh my God, he wasn't talking about, or I was like the capsule drop sequence. I was like, there's a great movie, but like the capsule drop sequence in Arrival, it's like, I was like, oh, Contact. which by the way, I have seen in the last year. So Contact with Jodie Foster and Matthew McConaughey, early role for Matthew McConaughey, right? Where Jodie Foster plays a brilliant scientist devoted to the search for essentially ETs. She works for an organization called SETI. And after years of listening to a deep space radio signals, there's a mysterious transmission. They embark on a groundbreaking journey to make contact with alien life. So I guess tell us a little bit about the scene. It's toward the end of the film, if I recall. It's toward the climax, the scene that was like really impactful.
Yeah, it's just it's a master class in editing and music and visual effects. It's you've been waiting last 2 hours of the movie to get to this point where they're finally going to turn on the machine and send somebody through to go ostensibly meet extraterrestrial life. And just the way that the music builds. I love listening to just the score of the scene, because the way it just builds this very simple melody over and over again, and it gets more complicated as the machine starts to accelerate. The pod that Jodie's character is in just starts vibrating very violently, and all the television monitors start flipping the static, and nobody's really sure what's going on. And it's just this fantastic. Talk about a lot of cuts. This would be really hard to storyboard as an amateur, because it just accelerates and accelerates and accelerates and accelerates until finally she drops through, and then you go through this elaborate VFX sequence of her going through wormholes and all this stuff. But for me, it's all the buildup that is just so masterfully done. Robert Zemeckis, I think, had one of the most unmitigated streak of wins from 1985 for at least, call it 15, 20 years of just every movie just was an absolute masterclass. From Back to the Future through Contact, Who Framed Roger Rabbit, yeah. Castaway, Forrest Gump, just like no, there were no problem children in this era. But of those, Contact is my favorite.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, Contact is amazing. For me, I think Forrest Gump is I don't know, there's something really special about Forrest Gump. I also saw it, my whole family in the theater, and but Contact was brilliant, and it still holds up. I saw it last year, actually, like for the first time since it came out, sort of thing. So yes, good choices. And one thing I did we just touched upon about in Superman is just John Williams' score. I saw John Williams in concert last year at the New York Philharmonic, where so that was pretty incredible. And actually, Steven Spielberg made a guest appearance there. Like they were like showing all his film. They were doing all of his iconic films, and it was really incredible seeing like it paired with Superman on the screen and him there composing the New York Philharmonic.
It's really great. I took my my older son when we first moved to LA, I took him to the John Williams birthday concert at the Hollywood Bowl.
Nice.
Because he's both my kids are really into music and really film music. My older son was got to the point where I can hum a melody from a movie that he's seen, and he'll tell me what scene it's from, which I can't necessarily do. So it was seeing him light up, seeing melodies that he's familiar with from me blasting John Williams music in the car, taking him to school was really cool.
That is pretty cool. So Kent, where could I guess people follow along with Bleecker Street and what you're doing?
Yeah, well, look, we have presences on all the major social channels. So, Bleecker Street at or either Bleecker Street or Bleecker Street Films on Twitter. I'm not calling it X. Threads, Facebook, TikTok, YouTube. Our website is at bleekerstreetmedia.com. And we got a lot of fun stuff coming out. So, like, review, and subscribe. Isn't that what they say?
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for being on the podcast. I really
Thank you for having me. This was super fun.
Thank you for listening to the Film Situation podcast.